All right. Well, thank you guys for having me. I'm Alicia Lee, and I'm out here in rural Colorado. So hopefully my internet connection stays okay through the training. Uh, because yes, we are in very rural area. But uh, so I wanted to just share. I had done a group proposal project for one of Doug's classes, and I had done it on doing an adoption group. And so he had asked if I would share a little bit about what I had in my group proposal. And so I'm going to do a little bit of that today, and then hopefully we'll have some time for questions and things like that. Um, so I'll start by just sharing a little bit of my story. My husband and I, even before we got married, we both had a heart for adoption. He is from a family where he's the only biological child, and his brother and sister are both adopted. I just always had a heart for it. And so we knew early on that we both wanted to adopt. We weren't expecting to adopt as soon as we did, but we both were geared that way. We had our son after about 4 years of marriage, and things were going well. He was healthy and happy, and things were good with him, and we wanted to continue having children, and I could not have any more children. And so we decided that maybe that was God's way of telling us that now is the time to adopt. And um, so we started looking into adoption. Both my husband and I run a youth center here in Colorado. And so we were on missionary support or are on missionary support. And so through all of that, as we were at that time, all we were really familiar with were like the overseas adoptions and things like that. And so, or through an agency. And so as we were looking, we were going, there's no way we're going to be able to adopt. It's too expensive. And how are we ever going to save up enough money to do this? And some friends of ours said, let me put you in touch with my aunt. They've adopted several kids, and so she did, and they had adopted through the state, and so through foster adoptive care. And so we got excited about that and started going that route. At the time, we intended to adopt one child. And as we started going through the training classes, we decided, okay, well, we would take two if there was a sibling group. And our son was about 3 years old at the time. And interestingly enough, he was praying for younger sisters at that time. We didn't really know that at the time, but we were talking about it later and found out that he was praying for younger sisters. So the younger sisters came in a set of three. And they called us and said, we know you only wanted to adopt two, but we have this sibling group of three little girls. Would you consider this? And by the way, we need to know by tomorrow what your decision is. And so we prayed about it, talked to our parents, and decided, okay, it really feels like this is what God is putting before us. And so we said yes. And then it turned out that their mom had returned back. And so they had been abandoned, and their mom had returned back and wanted to work things out. So then we waited for about 9 months while they tried to give mom an opportunity to have the girls back, and she just couldn't get it together to be able to care for them. So about 9 months later, we met them. We had never met them or seen a picture of them. We met them, and we just knew that those were our daughters. And So we adopted them, and so at that time we had our son was 4, and then the 3 girls were 3, 2, and 1. So it was a busy, crazy time. And we learned a lot as we were going on. We had good training through the county. But as we went along, we realized that there were a lot of things that we didn't know, and we weren't sure how to parent our adopted children. And so we kind of learned along the way from different resources or other people that we knew that had adopted. But the research was more minimal at that time. And so a lot has come out since then that as I've learned and grown, there are things that I wish I would have known back then. But God was gracious and gave us tools that we needed as we needed them. When our youngest daughter was, I believe, 6 years old, then we had a tragedy in our family, and my aunt died. And she was a single mom and had 3 boys. And so again, we felt like the Lord was calling us to maybe bring them home to live with us. And so we again prayed and talked to our parents about it and all of that, and decided to bring in these 3 boys. So they were older than all of our other kids. So at the time that they came to us, the youngest was 12, and then the 2 twin boys were 13. And we've been working with teenagers all these years, but it's very different when you have teenagers in your home. And so we were learning a lot as they were not only teenagers, but ones that had come from a pretty traumatic background and a pretty tragic story. And funny thing too with that was our son had been praying for brothers after his sisters came. He loved his sisters, but then he decided he really wanted brothers, and he wanted older brothers, so he was praying for that. So after we brought the boys home, we told Toby to stop praying for more children. But no, God was good in that and gracious. And so now all 7 of our kids are out of the home. Our youngest graduated last year, and it has been quite a journey. It's been a very joyful, exciting journey, but it's also been met with a lot of challenges that came just from adopting, and the dynamics of that. So let me go ahead and get into some of the main things that either I wish I would have known or that were helpful to us as we adopted. So one of the big things is connection. And you probably all are very familiar with the attachment and how vital that is to building connections and relationships. So when you first adopt, there can often be this idea that, oh, we're just going to immediately bond, and we want to love these children and they're going to love us, and it doesn't always happen that way. So that can be a little bit discouraging and can make you question, is this something that we should have done? What's wrong here? But just knowing that will take some time because of the attachment cycle. So in the first year of life, the infant has a physical or emotional need, cries, somebody come save me. I need this need met. And so a loving caregiver comes over, smiles, meets the need, is warm, loving, And so that child learns that this person is safe, somebody that they can trust. They're a good person, they're loving. And so with that, then they build that secure attachment. What happens with adopted children is that their needs have not been met in some way, usually or oftentimes in that first year of life, whether they're neglected or abused or whatever it might be, they have not um, developed that secure attachment. So instead, what has happened is that they have developed early narratives that center around survival. So when they have not had basic needs met in a healthy and loving manner and have not had expectations from loving limits, their brains have developed neural pathways to meet physical and emotional survival. So those patterns are very difficult to override because they've been set so early. But the good news is that they can be overridden and new neural pathways can be developed. In the second year of a child's life, it's the second year trust cycle. The toddler wants to do something naughty, and the child tests the limits by attempting to do or get what they want. And the caregiver sets loving limits over the toddler's want. The child experiences a sense of trust. People love me enough to keep me safe. So that happens in a healthy attachment. In an unhealthy attachment, then again, they're feeding off of that survival. And so only I can keep myself safe, and they don't have that trust of other people keeping them safe. With adopted children, there's unexpected attachments. So for us, it was really eye-opening when we took our kids to the grocery store. Our middle daughter, especially, she, we believe, had has reactive attachment disorder. And now looking on all of their lives, I think all three girls struggle with reactive attachment disorder. But we knew a little bit earlier with her. And one of the key signals of that was that we'd go to the grocery store and she would just raise her hands up for any stranger to pick her up. And it scared us, obviously, but we were pretty blown away by that, because usually most children, she was 2 at the time, most children at that age have kind of that stranger resistance, and she did not. And she would just go to anybody. She was very charming, very sweet. So people, automatically gravitated to her. So we had to be really careful in taking her out in public places just to make sure that she was right with us, because she would go to about anybody. As they got older, their attachments would often go toward friends that were more troubled teens, troubled kids, and they would attach pretty quickly to them. They would also, like if they just met somebody, pretty quickly that person was called their best friend. So without even hardly knowing them, they would call them their best friend, or they would call other people's moms mom. They would refer to her as mom without really having much of a relationship with her. So that was a little bit different from our son, and even some of our older sons too. Even though they had been adopted, they had a little bit better attachment than the girls did. They also were really had difficulty with relationships with the opposite sex, and so boyfriends and all of that was a difficult time period for them, and making unwise decisions with that. So just those unhealthy attachments were very evident throughout their lives. Resistance to connection. So what we also learned early on was that the more that we tried to connect and the closer that we felt to them and they felt to us, the more they would resist, because all of a sudden we were becoming close and that was unsafe for them. They didn't feel safe. And so they would resist by trying to push us away through misbehavior and things of that nature. And so that was sort of their narrative, that I can't get too close to anybody because that person is going to leave me or abandon me or neglect me, because they learn that early in life. And we've seen that with many adopted children, that they tend to resist connection. So for the parent, don't be discouraged by that. Continue to pursue, continue to love, and remain tethered. That was a really good piece of advice for us. Just remain tethered, no matter what they're doing. And our counselor gave us an example. She said it might feel like there's a monkey on the other side of that rope and they're just hopping all over and you can't get control of them, but remain tethered and keep that connection. The second portion is to meet their emotional needs. So some helpful ways to do that is to learn and speak their love language, and remembering that they may perceive that as frightening, not safe. So most people, if you start to speak their love language, they'll respond in good ways and respond well with that. An adopted child may push back on that because it doesn't feel safe. Don't take that resistance personally, keep pursuing. Also, you want to look for ways that the child feels comforted. So it's kind of mimicking that first year attachment cycle. What are things that comfort them? For our youngest daughter, a weighted blanket was really helpful to her, and snacks. She liked her snacks. So we would try to have the snacks that she liked and her weighted blanket around, and especially when we could see her anxiety or that resistance coming up, we just kind of gently go over and offer her one of the snacks or go grab her blanket for her and things like that. Food was a big comfort thing for a lot of our kids, just home cooked meals and things like that brought them comfort. So it's seeking out what makes them feel comforted and offering those things to them, creating that environment of comfort. The other thing is to provide as many yes responses as possible. So meeting physical needs and saying yes are ways that trust, connections, and healthy brain development are built in the formative years. Therefore, it's important to work to develop those qualities now, no matter the age of the child, by meeting physical and emotional needs and saying yes to as many things as possible. And that comes from a book called The Connected Parent, by Karen Purvis and I think Lori Wells. I can't remember her first name. Anyway, so doing, saying yes to as many things as you can, because they have been said no to a lot and they have been neglected. And so being able to create yes opportunities for them, opportunities where you know you can say yes, are really helpful. So it takes a little bit of creativity and maneuvering things a little bit so that you're able to say yes, and try to build that connection through that. one of my daughters suggested doing a yes day. And so we worked toward that, doing a day where everything was yes. So we had to set some boundaries on that, but doing the yes day. Control, what is mine and what is theirs? So with this, in parenting in general, I think it's a tendency to want to control because we want to keep them from making poor choices. We want what's best for our children. So sometimes that prompts us to try to take control more than we should. And especially with adopted kids, that doesn't go over very well. It doesn't go over well with most kids, but this was helpful for us to read the book Losing Control and Liking It by Tim Sanford. So what do I need to let go? What are some things that, you know what, if I don't hound them on this, or I don't try to be so involved in this, that's okay. This was also really helpful to me to hear was you don't need to be the police, but you do need to be the enforcer when boundaries are broken. So because of their behaviors that came out, it seemed like for a while there, we were constantly, always on edge, like what's going to happen next. And so we were always looking for these things to happen because they often did. But to learn this was really helpful, that I don't have to be just looking and policing them. But when I do realize that boundaries have been broken, then, my husband and I had different ways that we would enforce the rules and consequences that would come from that. That's to say also that natural consequences are the best. So if they get in trouble at school, oftentimes, depending on what it was, that just ended up being their consequence because the consequence was natural enough and difficult enough for them to learn from it. Using enforceable statements is also helpful. So making sure that what you say to them as you're enforcing things, that you are able to follow through with that. So it can be easy when your emotions are heightened because they have just gone to the bathroom in the trash can instead of the toilet right next to you, or things like that, you do not get so worked up about it, and you are able to give consequences that are reasonable and that you can follow through with. You don't need to be permissive, but instead offer effective choices. Again, they haven't had many choices. And so giving them some freedom to choose is really helpful. So you can still be able to get the things done that you want to or want from them, but giving them choices. For example, would you like to finish your chores now or after dinner? So the chores are still going to get done, but it gives them a little bit more freedom. Would you like to be home by 9:30 or 10? So those are some examples of that. Discipline, the power of do-overs, and some other good stuff. So do-overs was introduced to us when our sons had already graduated and been out of the house, and we were struggling with quite a few things with our daughters in their teenage years. Something about adolescence, obviously adolescence is a difficult time anyway, but for adopted children, oftentimes it really does a number on them. And you'll often see behaviors that make you think, who is this child and what happened to them. We saw this especially with our oldest daughter. She was pretty compliant, pretty easygoing in her elementary and young years. And then when adolescence hit, and even pre-adolescence, um, we started seeing some pretty extreme behaviors, promiscuity and defiance, and just a lot of things that seemed very uncharacteristic of her. And so as our girls became teenagers, we sought counseling, and our counselor gave us this tip, which was to use do-overs. And so the way that works is when the behavior is something that you don't want, or something that you do want, I guess, and they haven't done, you give them an opportunity to do a do-over. So just very calmly, you say, well, I think we need to do a do-over. And then they know that they are to repeat that action in a better way, or that response in a better way. For us, sometimes that took several do-overs in a row, and that's okay. So with that, you have to be prepared that if you're going to follow through with the do-overs, it may take some time. So you might miss an appointment or miss an activity that you had planned to do. But it's really important to stay consistent with them and until they get it right. So you're modeling for them what appropriate behavior is, as well as giving them an opportunity to make things right. So it's putting some control back in their hands as well. Time-ins instead of timeouts are really helpful, again, because of that connection and loss of connection. Timeouts removes them from the caregiver. So what we would do often is just hold our children when I'll never forget with our middle daughter. She gave us a run for our money in those early years. She's the one that we knew early on had reactive attachment disorder. And so she was just throwing this huge tantrum, and my husband just pulled her into his arms and just held her. And she screamed and threw a fit and cried and, threw her arms, and he just held her and didn't say anything, just kept assuring her, it's okay, it's okay. And I think that went on for about an hour, a good hour. It may have been even a little bit longer. And so those time-ins were helpful to building that connection and helping them feel safe. It's really important to be calm and consistent, keeping your tone even and level, being calm, responding in calm ways, not with sarcasm, not with, sighs and things like that, but just being that calm presence for them, and then being consistent. If you say something, follow through with it. Being consistent across the board was really important for our family. We had behaviors at all levels, kids at all levels of development, and we just tried to keep everything as consistent as possible. What we expected from one child, we expected from all of them pretty much across the board. So that was helpful in our family. Another important thing is to be aware of triangulation. So adopted kids and foster kids are really good at reading people. They've learned that because that helps keep them safe. So they can read people so well. But with that, they also are pretty good at pitting people against each other. So it's really important for the parents, the mom and dad, to be on the same page, to know what has happened with the relationship with the child and mom, and the relationship with the child and dad, so that the child isn't pitting them against each other. That can also happen with school. We often had stories told to teachers that were untrue, and we ended up at the school quite often talking to teachers and administrators about things going on that were just ways that they were trying to get the teacher to believe something that mom and dad did, or sometimes even teachers against teachers. And then the last thing in the discipline area is just to be firm, concise, and non-emotional. And it can seem really flat. And I think sometimes people would look at us and think, man, you're not very caring with your kids, but that was better received than really sweet and kind and fluffy. They don't respond as well to that. So being firm, concise, and non-emotional was the best approach for them. This is kind of a fun one. Building trust using mathematics. Again, our counselor gave this to us. So she said, trust is equivalent to consistent behavior plus accountability over time. So what we would do then is my husband and I would set consistent behaviors that we would like to see from our kids. And so they'd know these are the things that are going to help build trust. And then it was their responsibility to let us know how they were going to show accountability with that. So for example, if they wanted to go to a friend's house, it was okay for us to check with that parent and make sure that our child was there, or even drive by the house and make sure that their car was there, or things like that. So accountability for those behaviors builds trust over time, and letting the children know that, you know, when trust is broken, it takes quite a bit of time to build that back. So it's not going to just be one time or two times that you behave this way and are accountable for it. It's going to be several times, and then we can start to give you a little bit more freedom and test that freedom out. For our kids, it was we had to be very clear about things, because if we said, you know, time, it's going to take some time, well, that to them might mean 2 days, whereas we were thinking several weeks of building that. Some common behaviors for foster and adopted children are lying, stealing, hoarding food, promiscuity, sneaking out of the house, enuresis or encopresis. We saw most of these things. So lying was really, really big. Pretty much all of our adopted kids were pretty good at lying. And so that was a challenge for us to just help them learn to speak truth. And that comes from that insecure attachment and just trying to protect themselves. And so they've learned that lying is a way that they can control their environment. So those, yeah, all of those are things that are difficult for them. We dealt with, you know, even, and I've heard other adoptive parents talk about this too, like pooping and all of that in older children, which seems very uncommon for children of that age, but we dealt with that with one of our older boys that came to us in their later years. And so again, natural consequences were helpful in that. One time there was poop all over the bathroom, and he had to clean it up, and that didn't happen again. So those are just, I say that more to let you know that those are pretty typical behaviors, they can seem very abnormal. And so for adoptive parents, it can feel like, what is wrong and what am I doing wrong? But just understanding that those are pretty common for adopted kids. And then lastly is just the importance of self-care and respite. Parents with adopted children are taking care um, in a sense, children with special needs. They're not physical special needs, and so that can be difficult, I think, for other people to understand because there's nothing physically wrong with them. And they're often very, very social and very good at getting to know people and all of that. And so what people see on the outside is often very different from what's going on inside the home. Because again, they're not close to the people out there. And so they don't have to resist those connections. So they are more sweet and more kind oftentimes. And then at home, they're becoming close to the parents. So they're resisting and often doing that through misbehavior. So it's really important for the parents to practice regular self-care. Just even small things that just help them get some sense of relief as they're caring for these children. Developing a good network of people that can provide, some respite, as well as understanding the unique dynamics of adoption. When we adopted our 3 girls, our oldest daughter had severe seizures, like majorly severe. And so we were in and out of the hospital constantly, had several ER visits, went to her neurologist pretty frequently. So we were having to take her back and forth to these appointments and trying to figure out what was going on with her. And again, she was just 3 years old at the time, so a pretty tiny thing. And so with that, we had a group of people that were very reliable and very helpful to us in taking care of our other children. And they understood some of the dynamics of adoption and the importance of the kids connecting to us. And so they made things very clear about that they're just the babysitter or whatever. And so that was really helpful to us. And then throughout, we've had a group of people that have just been really good in helping us through the different stages of adoption. Focus on your marriage. That is so important and so key. Because again, with the triangulation or just even the stresses that can come with adoption, your marriage can get neglected, and it's really important to stay focused on your marriage, and do what's needed. We would try to get away every year for our anniversary and do a weekend thing, do some date nights as we could and things like that. So just focusing on your marriage and then taking time outs when you need to. You don't have to offer a consequence right away. You can think about it. You can let them know we're going to talk about this at some point. Might even be the next day, when you've had time to think about a clear and good way to teach them to be responsible. And it's important for them to take ownership of things and to be responsible as much as possible for the behaviors that have come out. So making them solve the problems is very helpful, unless it gets too overwhelming for them or the consequences are going to be too great, then you may have to step in and solve the problem. So with that, you may need a break to try to figure things out. And then I've just got this slide here. It's kind of hard to see. Sorry about that, but there's some resources that can be really helpful. Karen Purvis has a lot of good information. She does trust-based relational intervention. So trying to build that connection back that has been lost. So she's got the Connected Parent as well as the Karen Purvis Institute of Child Development. You can be trained in TBRI, which is something that I like to do eventually. I haven't been able to do that yet, but I've started watching some of her training videos. Focus on the Family has some really good adoption resources. Show Hope is really good. It's the organization by Stephen Curtis and Mary Beth Chapman. And so they have a Hope for the Journey conference, which I think is this month actually, and it uses a lot of the TBRI information. So they're a good source of information. Inside Understanding How Reactive Attachment Disorder Thinks and Feels was a really good book for us to get. It's crazy when you open it up because it's written from the perspective of a child with reactive attachment disorder. So it's sort of like a journal, and it's just very loud and words kind of all over the place, and it looks very chaotic. So for somebody whose mind doesn't work that way, it looks very chaotic. And so my husband and I had it open and we were looking at it. My daughter saw it, one of my daughters, and she said, whoa, that's how my brain feels. And so it is very true to how the brain feels and thinks. And then the back portion of that book has some good tips for working with reactive attachment disorder. Losing Control and Liking It is one that I mentioned earlier. And then the Love and Logic resources by Foster Klein and Jim Fay are also really helpful. So that's what I have. Let's see.
Thanks, Alicia. That was great.
Yes, that was awesome. Yeah.
Even how I can stop sharing. There we go.
Okay.
I gotta find the button there.
There we go. That's excellent. Yeah, great. That was awesome. Thank you so much. You put a lot of work into that. I love the resources at the end too. Yeah, a lot of good stuff. So have this on recording. So I'll post this out on.
Oh goodness.
I've got a YouTube channel
Okay.
that I kind of just started, so I'll put it out there with the rest of the training and stuff. So does anybody have any questions or comments? And just don't use any personal information or anything too, but if you have questions about your clients or something like that too. But if anybody has any questions for Alicia while you got her here.
Yes, I have one. Hey, how did you deal with the boyfriend girlfriend thing? I work with a lot of like younger, even 10 and 11, and there's still one girlfriend and a boyfriend, and it's taking a lot of energy and focus.
Yeah. It does take a lot of energy and focus. And again, I think that policing part was really helpful for us, that we didn't have to try to catch every little thing that, because we did have clear expectations on, you know, we had a dating syllabus that we designed for our kids. So we didn't give them like, you can start dating at 16 or whatever. We said, we want you to be ready to date as much as possible. And so my thought was, you train for a lot of different things and prepare, like driving, you don't just go in and start driving. You have to read the materials and learn things before you're able to drive. So we did that with dating. So we gave them a dating syllabus right before between middle school and high school. And then it was up to them how long it took them to complete it. So they had to read some books, and they had to interview some couples that had been married for over 5 years and just get some ideas from them. And they had to do some self-reflection writing, like, what are my strengths? What do I want in a spouse eventually? And some things like that. And then some practice dates with mom and dad and stuff like that. So that was what we did. And so they knew that until that was done, they were not supposed to be dating, but that didn't always happen. And so then the sneaking and all of that would happen. So again, we would just be firm and concise. Well, this isn't supposed to happen. And so this is the consequence. You have to, they were maybe grounded, or, had to be where we could make sure that they weren't around that person and stuff. So
It's good. Thank you.
I don't know if that's helpful, but
Yes. Yes.
So, Alicia, that was all very, very amazing and lightning to me. I have a client right now that I'm working with that is adopted. And I mean, everything you said they're going through. I think my main question for you is, I think where they get stumped a lot is the lying. So I didn't know if you could maybe give me some advice, because there is constant lying, and they are just to the end. I thought the do-over was good. I can remember an incident that they told me just this last session that I thought, oh, that would really help to do a do-over, so that she could tell the truth. So what would be, if you had any more advice on lying, what would that be? Like how to help a parent through all of that?
For us, it was really helpful just to have the validation to begin with. So just validating them and letting them know, hey, I know this is hard, but just know that this is a normal response to the trauma that has taken place. And so sometimes just that understanding that the lying isn't, it really isn't personal. Usually it's not to get at the parents. It's more just that developed, those neural pathways that have been developed. So a lot of it is trying to change the way the brain works. So we would call it upstairs and downstairs brain. And if they were in their downstairs brain, they were in their reactive brain, the fight or flight, which is a pretty normal place to operate from for adopted children. So that's where the lying comes from. It's just very reactive. And so trying to help them use their upstairs brain, the prefrontal cortex, and allowing opportunities for them to do that. So we did some things just to help strengthen that. One of the things is you can have the child write down every day 3 things that they need. And the needs may even come about as wants. So for example, they might say, I need Oreo cookies. And might really feel like they need Oreo cookies, that the desire may be so strong that it feels more like a need than a want.
Right.
So they write 3 things down that they need each day. And then the goal is for them to ask for help in meeting one of those needs. Because if they ask for help, it creates a neurotransmitter. And so it is really, 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 really hard for adopted kids to ask for help, because again,
Okay.
then I'm not in control of my safety. I'm inviting somebody else into that space. And that
Right.
is frightening and scary. So if they are able to ask for help, that's building that neurotransmitter. Then having them write 3 things that they're thankful for that day. And that also can help build those brain pathways, those neurotransmitters. So a lot of it is just helping them start to be able to process that in a better way.
Okay.
The lying is going to continue until they feel safe, really.
Okay.
And that's a hard thing to get to. So those comforting things, making sure that you're meeting the needs in a calm and effective way. We
Right.
did see some big changes with our youngest daughter after we started implementing some of, like I said, there are things that we wish we would have known a lot sooner. But she really grabbed hold of some of that stuff, like writing the 3 things down every day and then starting to ask for help, which was huge for her. Like even to ask for help with homework and stuff, she just
Right.
never did. And so she started to do that, and we saw a change, and she wasn't lying as much. So
I love
doing
that.
other things, the yeses, not policing, all of that helps to build that trust for them so that they don't feel like they need to lie.
Okay. Okay, that makes good sense. Thank you so much. That's good.
Yep.
All right. Any other questions?
And Thomas, I can look up the dating syllabus and give that to Doug, and then he can pass that on if you want it.
I think that's amazing. I mean, I think you guys have done an amazing job. So yeah, that would be helpful. Thank you.